Hi, welcome to the video lecture for chapter 31, American Life in the Roaring Twenties. I have actually page numbers for you, starting with page number 720, where the chapter begins, and we start talking about this idea that America turns inward after World War One. In 1919, people were really tired of what had happened during the war and the sacrifices that they had to make, and people were really ready to actually, not be so outward towards other countries, not to be involved, to try to keep to themselves and understand better where the country was going. Um, Among the many things that happened at the beginning of this decade, the 1920s, one of the things that actually took place that was very negative was the Red Scare. And with every new wave of immigrants that would come into the country, a lot of these immigrants, the majority of them, were immigrants from southeastern European countries, which were countries that were always on political upheaval. There were countries that had very dubious and very questionable forms of government, including socialist and communist and anarchist systems that didn't actually sort of share the same ideas as the American system. And again, the Red Scare, beginning at the beginning of the Red Scare, beginning at the beginning of the decade, actually had an impact on how people began to see these immigrants coming in. On page 721, where the cartoon has the guys, the radical Reds, leaving the city, of course, the city being cleaned out of these radicals by the American Legion, this patriotic crusade against radicals. That even the government jumped into this. This is not just the people out in the community doing this, although there was a sense of hysteria in the community, but even the government jumped into it, and actually the Attorney General, Mitchell Palmer, authorized the actual organization of raids into people's homes and looking at people's personal information and determining who these radicals were. And again, that's really important that you know that what the Attorney General did. And here it's on page 720, 721. The big Red Scare of 1919-1920 resulted in a nationwide crusade against left-wingers whose Americanism was suspect. Attorney General Mitchell Palmer, who saw red too easily, earned a title of fighting Quaker by his excess of zeal in rounding off suspects. They ultimately total about 6,000 people. Again, the government embraced this. This is very un-American. However, one part of the government embracing this had to do with the fact that the more they vilify these people, the more they blame these immigrants, the better it was going to be for business, because business could actually use this in order to stifle the unions which were associated with communism and anarchism. So business is going to benefit and profit from this. Of course, there's always the case of a scapegoat. We have to have a scapegoat, and in the case of the beginning of the 1920s, was the pair of Sacco and Vanzetti. These two immigrants, Sacco was a shoemaker and Vanzetti was actually a fish peddler, were convicted in 1921 for the murder of a paymaster. It's someone who actually takes cash from the bank to a factory. They have to have a payroll, and they're going to pay the employees. So it's a lot of money. A paymaster would actually have a lot of money carrying it from the bank to the factories, and they were convicted of actually committing this crime. There was some question as to whether one of them was actually really involved, but the judge and the jury and the case made against Sacco and Vanzetti was basically a case made in order to have them be a scapegoat, to make an example out of them, make an example in terms of what's going to happen to you if you are a radical anarchist, communist, socialist, and you venture into those ideals. Again, it was very unfair the way that they prosecuted them. The judge actually was very prejudiced. These were two men who were immigrants, Italians, atheists, anarchists, and draft dodgers. That doesn't mean that they were criminals. They just happened to be all these other things. And the judge actually made us an example out of them. I'm going here on the next slide. I'm going on the slide where it says that, they were electrocuted. There was a mass outcry in support of actually Sacco and Vanzetti throughout the world. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough. The case had become a media circus by the time when it was the verdict came down, and again they were electrocuted. And also the other thing that happened was that in the 1980s, the Massachusetts state legislature actually forgave them and pay some restitution to their descendants. Again, all this hatred against foreigners is going to spur new life, spawn new life on the KKK as an organization. The Ku Klux Klan actually had begun in 1867 after the Civil War. It was an organization that began in the South in order to intimidate blacks from voting and exercising their other rights. For a period of time, it actually went dead. It was a very underground organization. And at the beginning of the 1920s, with this upsurge in hatred against anti-American sentiments, the Ku Klux Klan actually breathes new life. This is on page 722. It claimed in the mid-1920s with about 5 million dues-paying members. And again, one of the things that we talked about in class that is, problematic in the South during the 1920s is that a lot of the crimes that these people committed as a KKK organization were not brought to justice because a lot of the judges and the prosecutors and attorneys and the legal system itself down in the South, many of those judges and prosecutors and attorneys and even members of the jury were members of the Ku Klux Klan too. So it was very difficult to actually get a conviction for any of the crimes that they committed. We know the Ku Klux Klan today mainly for being very anti-black, but also, as it says on the slide, for the chapter, says that they were anti-foreigner, anti-Catholic, anti-Jewish, anti-pacifist, anti-communist, anti-internationalist, anti-revolutionary, anti-bootlegger, anti-gambling, anti-adultery, and anti-birth control. Anti-internationalist has to deal with the fact that Lenin and his communist cronies out in the Soviet Union had actually developed an organization called the Internationale. And this organization was designed primarily to spread communism throughout the world. And again, anything that the Ku Klux Klan saw as associated with the international vein, they're going to just automatically think that they were socialist and communist and anarchist. So again, enough about the Ku Klux Klan. So far as what we need to know for the chapter, again, all these other things are kind of interesting and funny in some way. How they used to call their leaders the Grand Goblins and the King Kegels and the Grand Dragons and all this other stuff. It's just really beyond words to try to describe why these people believe and think the way they do, but they have a right to be in this country. They have a right under the Constitution to actually believe what they believe. And as wrong as they might be, we need to respect that. Okay, I'm going to stop here now and then do the controlling the immigration flow in the United States in the next lecture, starting on page 723.